Trevor Engelson finally spoke. And when he did, the truth about Meghan Markle hit harder than anyone could have imagined. You might think you knew her story, the Hollywood actress turned royal, the fairy tale marriage, the sudden exit from Britain. But what if everything you believed was carefully constructed, planned years in advance, long before anyone else even noticed? How much of the Meghan Markle we saw was real, and how much was a performance, a chess move, meticulously calculated for maximum impact? Today, we dive deep into that question, peeling back layers of charm, ambition, and secrecy that Trevor Engelson has finally revealed. What he's saying isn't flattering, and it changes everything we thought we knew. But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates. Imagine being in Trevor's shoes for a moment. You're married to someone who seems perfect on the surface. She's smart, beautiful, charismatic, the kind of woman everyone notices. But behind closed doors, there's a pattern. Subtle at first, barely noticeable. The little decisions, the way she manages conversations, her timing with media exposure, even the way she handles friends and family. At first, you think it's normal, maybe just quirks of personality. But then, one day, a pattern emerges. And that pattern isn't innocent. It's deliberate, strategic, carefully orchestrated. That was Trevor's awakening. And what he realized about Meghan Markle is a story the world needs to hear. It all begins with the question, was Meghan always planning her next move? Was she playing a game that no one else even knew existed? And if she was, how far did she go to make sure that every step, every career move, every friendship, every public image, worked in her favor? These are the questions that have haunted the tabloids, the public, and the royal family alike. But now, for the first time, Trevor Engelson is giving us insight from the inside, from someone who knew her intimately, someone who lived through it firsthand. Let's rewind. Before the fairy tale wedding, before headlines screamed royal bride, there was Hollywood. Meghan Markle, the actress, navigating auditions, networking events, and social circles that promised fame and influence. Hollywood is a place of ambition, competition, and strategy. Every smile, every public appearance, every carefully crafted Instagram post can make or break a career. And Meghan, as Trevor explains, was always calculating, always aware of the ripple effect her actions could create. She wasn't just living, she was planning. From casual coffee meetings to high-profile parties, every move was a potential step toward something bigger, something more powerful. But Trevor doesn't paint a picture of a villain. He talks about charm, about wit, about moments that made you think you were in the presence of someone genuine. That's what made the realization even more jarring. How could someone so seemingly warm and relatable be orchestrating moves in such a calculated way? How could the woman you loved, trusted, and built a life with be simultaneously planning paths that would later shock the world? Think about the engagement rumors, for example. When Meghan and Trevor were together, whispers began circulating in Hollywood about her ambitions, her long-term plans, even her eventual leap toward royalty. At first, Trevor ignored them. Who wouldn't? She was engaging, funny, ambitious in the ways Hollywood encourages. But over time, the whispers became patterns. Invitations to certain events, timing with media releases, strategic relationships. Everything had a purpose. And Trevor, only gradually, began to see the threads connect. A tapestry that was as brilliant as it was disturbing. It's easy to look at Meghan Markle's life from the outside and see a fairy tale narrative. Actress marries prince, fairy tale wedding, lives happily ever after, right? But the reality, according to Trevor, is far more complex. It's not just a love story. It's a story about calculated strategy, about influence, about anticipating reactions and controlling perception. Think about it. In the public eye, appearances matter. Every smile, every handshake, every subtle gesture can be analyzed, dissected, and interpreted. Meghan, as Trevor reveals, understood this better than most. She didn't just react to opportunities. She created them, anticipated them, and positioned herself to take advantage in ways most people would never notice. And this isn't just speculation. Trevor shares specific anecdotes that illustrate her meticulous planning. Moments that, at the time, seemed trivial or inconsequential. A phone call that came at the perfect moment. A subtle comment that guided a conversation exactly where she wanted it to go. A decision about what to wear, who to meet, and when, all of it part of a broader strategy. At first glance, it may seem like coincidence, but pattern recognition tells a different story. And that story, according to Trevor, is one that the world has been missing. Now, let's pause and ask a question to you, the audience. How much of Meghan Markle's public persona was real, and how much was carefully constructed for effect? How often did she act with genuine emotion, and how often did she calculate outcomes before making a move? These are uncomfortable questions, but they are questions that, according to Trevor Engelson, need to be asked. Because when you step back and look at the sequence of events, from Hollywood beginnings, through the engagement, the marriage, the media campaigns, and finally, the move into royalty, a clear pattern emerges. A pattern that raises eyebrows, questions motives, and forces a reevaluation of everything we thought we knew. Trevor explains that the hardest part wasn't recognizing her planning. It was reconciling it with the person he thought he knew. It's one thing to hear rumors about someone. It's another to see them unfold in your daily life. The little things, the decisions that seemed insignificant at the time, suddenly take on new meaning. Invitations declined or accepted, friendships nurtured or abandoned, public appearances orchestrated with uncanny precision, all pieces of a much larger puzzle. And Trevor, living at the center of it, experienced the emotional roller coaster firsthand. He felt the charm, the warmth, the humor. And then he saw the strategy, the planning, the foresight that few could perceive. And here's the kicker. According to Trevor, Meghan wasn't subtle about it with herself. She was fully aware of her goals, and she had no qualms about pursuing them relentlessly. That's the part that shocks. That's the part that explains why so many of the rumors, whispers, and controversies surrounding her behavior now make sense. She wasn't reacting to circumstances. She was shaping them. Every career move, every public appearance, every relationship was a stepping stone in a plan only she fully understood. But it wasn't just about personal ambition. Trevor points out that there was also a calculated understanding of how the public perceives actions. Meghan knew the media cycle. She understood public sympathy, scandal, and intrigue, and she leveraged all of it. Think about it. From strategic interviews to selective leaks, from friendship cultivation to social alliances, she was playing the long game. It wasn't just Hollywood savvy. It was a mastery of perception and influence. And for someone like Trevor, living through it all, the realization was both fascinating and devastating. And yet, despite all the planning, there were moments of genuine connection, moments that made it harder to fully process what he was seeing. Trevor shares these moments with a sense of reflection, understanding that love and strategy are not always mutually exclusive. But in the end, the strategy always prevailed. And that's the point that drives this story. Meghan Markle, according to Trevor Engelson, was always thinking ahead, always calculating, and always positioning herself for the next move, long before anyone realized what was happening. As we move forward in this exposé, you'll hear the full timeline of events, the specific anecdotes, the moments that confirm what so many have suspected but could never prove. You'll witness how someone who appeared so spontaneous, so charming, so relatable, was in fact meticulously planning steps that would ultimately shock Hollywood, the royal family, and the world. And if you think this is just another celebrity gossip story, think again. This is a story about strategy, influence, betrayal, and the complex human motivations that drive even the most public figures. But here's the question that sets the stage for everything to come. If someone is capable of this level of calculation in private life, how does that shape the decisions they make on a global, public stage? How do personal ambition and public image collide when the stakes include not just a career, but an entire royal legacy? Trevor Engelson's revelations provide answers, and not all of them are comfortable to hear. And just as you think you might be able to predict what comes next, Trevor drops hints of moments so shocking, so revealing, that they defy expectation. The patterns he observed were subtle at first, almost invisible, then undeniable, then impossible to ignore. And the culmination of these revelations, as we will explore chapter by chapter, will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about Meghan Markle, her ambition, and the life she orchestrated long before the world ever caught on. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Few moments in life feel ordinary until, years later, you realize they were anything but. For Trevor Engelson, meeting Meghan Markle was one of those moments. On the surface, it seemed like a typical Hollywood encounter, an introduction at a friend's party, a few polite conversations, laughs shared over casual jokes. But beneath the surface, the first seeds of a story that would captivate the world were quietly being sown. How could Trevor have known, in that fleeting first encounter, that the woman in front of him would one day command global attention and become a figure so controversial that her every move would be scrutinized, dissected, and debated? The first thing Trevor noticed was her charm. Not the superficial charm that Hollywood actors often cultivate as part of their personas, but an intelligence that radiated in the way she spoke, the way she listened, the way she framed her thoughts. There was something deliberate about it, though subtle, almost imperceptible if you weren't paying attention. A way of asking a question that drew the answer she wanted, of steering a conversation without ever appearing to do so. At the time, it felt magnetic, exhilarating even. Trevor remembers thinking, here's someone I've never met before, yet she feels like she's known the room for years. But alongside the charm, there was ambition. Not the brash ambition of someone trying too hard to impress, but the quiet, confident ambition of someone who knows exactly what she wants and is willing to do what it takes to get it. This is the nuance that Trevor would later describe as one of the earliest indications of Meghan's strategic nature. At first, it didn't bother him. In fact, it was part of her allure. Who doesn't admire someone focused, determined, and unapologetically ambitious? Yet, in hindsight, those traits were not just admirable, they were revealing. Trevor recounts one early conversation that, at the time, seemed innocuous. They were talking about career aspirations, and Meghan casually mentioned her desire to not just act but to influence, to make connections that would matter, to create opportunities that were bigger than just a single film or television role. Trevor laughed at the time, thinking it was typical Hollywood talk, but the way she spoke about it, measured, precise, almost rehearsed, left a faint impression. Even then, she was thinking several moves ahead, anticipating outcomes, and planning the next step without anyone realizing it. This pattern continued in small, subtle ways. Dates that coincided perfectly with networking events, mentions of mutual friends that seemed coincidental but were strategically timed, casual comments about public perception and image that later revealed a sophisticated awareness of how actions are interpreted. Trevor began to notice the alignment between what Meghan said, what she did, and the results that followed. It wasn't chaotic or impulsive, it was calculated. And that realization hit him slowly, like pieces of a puzzle clicking together. Audiences watching from afar rarely see this side of relationships. They see the public gestures, the photos, the Instagram posts, the smiling appearances. But behind the scenes, people who know her describe a meticulous attention to detail, a way of planning interactions that ensures they work in her favor. For Trevor, living inside that world, the insight was immediate and intimate. He saw the decisions as they happened, the thought process behind them, and the subtle ways she influenced situations to achieve her goals. It was fascinating, and, eventually, it would become unnerving. Trevor recalls the early excitement of dating Meghan, the laughter, the shared moments of joy, the sense of discovering someone who felt larger than life. But even in those early stages, there were glimpses of the strategy beneath the surface. He would later describe it as a duality. Meghan was charming and spontaneous in ways that felt real, but behind that charm was a mind constantly analyzing, planning, and anticipating. It wasn't manipulative in the obvious sense. It was more like watching a chess master in a casual game. Every move had meaning, every gesture a potential consequence. The duality became more pronounced over time. Trevor noticed how Meghan navigated social dynamics, how she built alliances subtly, and how she handled conversations about the future. Early discussions about career, family, and ambition often had layers he only understood later. What seemed like casual chatter was actually strategic positioning, testing reactions, and assessing opportunities. And the more he observed, the more he realized that Meghan's awareness of perception was unmatched. She understood how the world saw her and, more importantly, how to shape that perception without ever appearing controlling. Yet, it wasn't all strategy and calculation. There were moments of vulnerability that felt entirely genuine. The laughter during late-night conversations, the moments of quiet reflection, the shared experiences that create intimacy. Those moments made it easier for Trevor to see Meghan as both a partner and a complex individual. But even then, the awareness of her foresight lingered in the back of his mind. How much of this spontaneity was real? How much was planned? And, ultimately, what were the consequences of that careful orchestration? Trevor also recalls the reactions of friends and acquaintances early on. Many were captivated by Meghan's charisma, drawn to her energy, and impressed by her confidence. But a few, subtle observers noticed what Trevor would later describe as a calculated edge. There was an intentionality in her interactions, a focus that went beyond ordinary ambition. It wasn't a matter of manipulation, it was a matter of foresight. Every handshake, every conversation, every meeting was a potential stepping stone toward a larger goal. And then there were moments of contradiction, times when Meghan would act unpredictably, almost impulsively, and yet those actions were still consistent with long-term patterns. Trevor would later describe this as a kind of psychological sophistication, the ability to appear spontaneous while remaining fully in control. To an outsider, these contradictions would seem confusing or even contradictory. But to someone watching closely, the patterns were clear. Meghan's foresight, strategy, and planning created an elegant dance between perception and reality. Trevor's awareness of these patterns gradually deepened as their relationship progressed. He started seeing connections between past actions and future outcomes. A casual comment at dinner might foreshadow a public statement months later. A seemingly random encounter with a friend could influence a chain of events in the media or social circles. And what was most striking was how seamlessly it all fit together. There were no obvious gaps, no errors, no miscalculations. It was as if Meghan were always aware of the endgame, always anticipating the next move before anyone else could. It's important to understand that this awareness didn't make her cold or distant. On the contrary, it made her magnetic. People were drawn to her intelligence, her poise, her ability to navigate complex social dynamics with grace. And for Trevor, that magnetism was part of the thrill, part of the fascination. But as time went on, the thrill was tinged with unease. The realization that someone you loved could be both genuine and calculating in equal measure created tension and sometimes doubt. As their relationship moved from casual dating into serious commitment, Trevor began to notice more overt examples of strategic thinking. Decisions about which events to attend, which friendships to cultivate, even which social causes to support, all had layers of purpose. Some were clearly intended to enhance public perception. Others were subtle tests of loyalty, gauging reactions, and assessing who could be trusted. And while Trevor understood that ambition and foresight are natural, the depth and consistency of her planning left a lasting impression. Trevor's narrative emphasizes that these insights didn't come from gossip or conjecture. They came from intimate, first-hand experience, from observing patterns in real time, from interactions that only someone inside the relationship could witness. And what he realized, slowly but unmistakably, was that Meghan's long-term planning extended far beyond personal ambition. It was a mindset, a way of engaging with the world that ensured she was always a few steps ahead of everyone else. Now, let's pause and ask the audience a direct question. If someone can orchestrate their public and private life so precisely, what does that mean for the people closest to them? Can love coexist with such calculated ambition, or does one inevitably give way to the other? Trevor Engelson's experience suggests that both are possible, but the consequences are complex, emotional, and, at times, painful. And just as Trevor began to piece together this pattern, an event occurred that would forever change his perspective, a small moment, almost imperceptible at the time, but one that would later serve as a key to understanding Meghan's strategic mind. That moment wasn't a dramatic confrontation, nor a betrayal that made headlines. It was subtle, almost invisible, yet profoundly revealing. And what happened next would shock Trevor in ways he never anticipated, setting the stage for revelations that the world would eventually learn, but only after years of whispers, rumors, and speculation. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Few places are as intoxicating and unforgiving as Hollywood. The lights, the parties, the endless networking. It's a world where every move is scrutinized, every smile calculated, and every misstep amplified. For Meghan Markle, Hollywood was both a playground and a proving ground. According to Trevor Engelson, this was where her ability to strategize, manipulate perception, and master social dynamics became most evident. And for him, being by her side in this environment was like watching someone play a high-stakes game that most people don't even realize exists. From the beginning, Meghan understood the rules of Hollywood better than most. She knew which events to attend, which people to connect with, and how to craft the right image for the right audience. It wasn't luck, it was methodical. Trevor recalls evenings where he would marvel at her awareness. A casual glance, a well-timed compliment, a subtle question, all perfectly placed to leave a lasting impression. While others were caught up in the glamour, Meghan was always observing, calculating, and positioning herself. Trevor tells the story of a dinner party where the dynamics of the room could have overwhelmed anyone else. Influential producers, A-list actors, and media executives filled the space. Most people would be intimidated, hesitant, or simply unaware of the subtle signals being exchanged. Meghan, however, navigated the room with the confidence of someone who had rehearsed this many times. Though Trevor insists it was natural for her, she listened more than she spoke, smiled when appropriate, and dropped comments that were seemingly casual but carried weight. She didn't just participate in the social hierarchy. She controlled it quietly, subtly, and masterfully. This was the side of Meghan that Trevor began to notice was less about charm and more about strategy. He recounts another story, a lunch with mutual friends, where she managed to shift an entire conversation without anyone realizing it. A subtle redirection here, a pointed question there. By the end, Meghan had positioned herself as the center of influence without appearing domineering. Trevor admits he was both impressed and slightly unnerved. He wondered how much of this was instinct and how much was calculated. And if she could do this in seemingly trivial social interactions, what might she be capable of in larger, more consequential situations? Hollywood, Trevor explains, is a place of contradictions. People crave authenticity, yet respond to performance. They admire spontaneity, yet reward calculated risk. And Meghan had mastered this balance to perfection. She could appear warm, genuine, and approachable, yet every action had an underlying purpose. To anyone observing casually, it looked effortless. To Trevor, living in close proximity to her life, the pattern became undeniable. She wasn't just ambitious. She was strategic in every interaction, every decision, and every relationship. Even her media interactions were telling. Meghan understood the power of narrative and the influence of perception. She cultivated relationships with journalists, gave interviews with carefully considered phrasing, and managed her image with precision. Trevor remembers moments when he would read articles about her and realize that the language used, the framing, even the timing of publication, aligned perfectly with her goals. It wasn't just luck or coincidence. It was manipulation in the most subtle, sophisticated way. Yet, Trevor emphasizes this wasn't malicious. At least, not initially. It was ambition honed into skill, a natural understanding of influence applied intelligently. The complexity came from the duality. Meghan could be loving, affectionate, and personable, while simultaneously orchestrating outcomes to her advantage. It was a delicate balance, one that left Trevor fascinated and increasingly aware of the depths of her planning. Trevor also noticed how Meghan handled her friendships in Hollywood. Friendships were rarely casual, they were strategic. People were connected, maintained, or discarded based on the alignment with her ambitions. Trevor recalls a particular instance with a fellow actress, someone who was close to Meghan at the start. Over time, Meghan's engagement with her friend became transactional, subtle but evident in small behaviors. Missed calls, calculated compliments, timed social media interactions. Trevor describes this as her way of testing loyalty and influence simultaneously, seeing who would remain supportive and who might become a hindrance. Her approach to career opportunities was no different. Trevor describes her moves as precise, calculated, and always forward-looking. She didn't just audition or accept roles randomly. She assessed the trajectory, visibility, and impact of each opportunity. Even in the early stages, long before anyone thought of royalty or global fame, Meghan's decisions were steps in a broader plan to increase influence, visibility, and strategic connections. Every role, every public appearance, every seemingly innocuous social interaction had the potential to be a stepping stone. Trevor remembers feeling simultaneously proud and uneasy during this time. On one hand, he admired her intelligence and drive. On the other, he recognized a growing distance, a sense that some part of her was always calculating, always observing, always preparing for the next move. And this wasn't just a Hollywood survival instinct. It was a pattern that would later define her public persona and her approach to life in a far more consequential arena, the British royal family. There were moments of genuine warmth in Hollywood, though, that made the recognition of her strategic nature more complex. Late-night conversations over dinner, shared laughter during long drives, casual compliments exchanged privately. These moments felt uncalculated, spontaneous, real. Trevor often reflects on this duality. How could someone capable of such precise orchestration also be capable of genuine human connection? He doesn't have a complete answer, only observations and anecdotes that illustrate a woman of extraordinary complexity. Trevor also shares insights into Meghan's awareness of public perception during this Hollywood period. She understood that image was currency, and she used it wisely. Small gestures, how she dressed, who she interacted with publicly, what she posted online, were not mere coincidence. Each had the potential to influence how she was perceived by friends, colleagues, and, eventually, the wider world. Even the smallest details were scrutinized and optimized for effect. And then there were contradictions that made her unpredictable. At times, she would act impulsively, break away from expected behavior, or express emotion in ways that seemed counter to her calculated persona. Yet, even these moments fit into a broader pattern when viewed in hindsight. They weren't mistakes or lapses. They were part of a sophisticated understanding of human behavior. By appearing spontaneous or emotional, she gained sympathy, influence, or trust, all tools in her larger strategy. Trevor explains that he didn't fully recognize the depth of this strategy until later. At first, it was fascination, then admiration, then, slowly, unease. The awareness that someone you care for and trust might be constantly orchestrating outcomes, testing reactions, and planning steps ahead of you creates a complicated mix of respect and doubt. Trevor reflects on the emotional tension of that period, the joy of connection, the thrill of shared ambition, and the creeping recognition that he was part of a carefully managed environment that he didn't fully control. But what truly solidified Trevor's understanding of Meghan's calculated nature was an incident that, at the time, seemed minor but in retrospect revealed her level of strategic thinking. A seemingly casual networking dinner, a chance meeting with a producer, a comment about career trajectory. These small interactions illustrated a pattern that was unmistakable once you could see the thread. Every action, no matter how small, had potential consequences that Meghan anticipated and leveraged. And here's the question to the audience. If someone can operate at such a level of precision in social and professional settings, how far can they go when the stakes are higher? Hollywood may have been the training ground, but the real stage was yet to come. Trevor Engelson's experiences show that the skills honed in the limelight, strategic planning, influence management, perception control, are not limited to career advancement. They are transferable, powerful, and potentially game-changing when applied to larger arenas. By the end of her Hollywood chapter, it was clear to Trevor that Meghan Markle was no ordinary actress, no ordinary partner, and no ordinary social operator. She was a woman capable of analyzing, planning, and executing moves far in advance, long before anyone else even realized there was a game being played. And as he began to piece together the patterns, he realized that the next phase of her life, the engagement, the move into the royal family, would test not only her skills but the perceptions of the entire world. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Engagement rumors in Hollywood are nothing new. They swirl, they explode, and sometimes they fizzle away. But when it came to Meghan Markle and Trevor Engelson, the rumors were different. At first glance, it seemed like ordinary Hollywood gossip. Whispers about romance, speculation about a possible wedding, fleeting mentions in tabloids. But for Trevor, these rumors carried weight. They weren't just idle chatter. They were subtle indicators of patterns that he had only begun to notice, and patterns that would eventually reveal a level of calculation he hadn't fully understood. From the beginning, Meghan was careful about timing. Trevor recalls conversations where she casually mentioned life plans, career goals, and future ambitions. On the surface, these were normal discussions between partners, but when Trevor looked back, he realized that the way she framed these conversations was deliberate. They planted seeds, subtly influencing perception, not just within their immediate circle, but in the public eye as well. Every interview she gave, every interaction captured by media, was positioned to align with a larger narrative she was crafting, one that only she fully understood. The first public hints of engagement rumors began innocuously. Friends, colleagues, and acquaintances noticed subtle changes in behavior, timing of outings, and social media hints that seemed almost too perfect to be coincidence. Trevor describes how the rumors escalated in a pattern he would later recognize: strategic leaks, carefully timed photos, and suggestive comments in public settings. She had a sense of how the narrative could be shaped, Trevor explains. Every interaction was a potential headline. At the time, Trevor admits he was naive. He thought of it as excitement, perhaps even innocent planning. After all, engagement rumors can be flattering, can generate enthusiasm among friends and family. But slowly, the pattern emerged. The timing of these rumors, the people involved in spreading them, and the way Meghan managed the reactions, it all pointed to a mind that was always thinking ahead. She wasn't just responding to gossip. She was anticipating it, steering it, even orchestrating it. One evening, Trevor recalls attending a small industry gathering with Meghan. Conversations shifted naturally from casual topics to discussions about life, ambitions, and relationships. At one point, Meghan brought up the concept of timing, not in terms of a wedding specifically, but in how public perception influences opportunities. It struck me then, Trevor recalls, that she was always aware of how the world would see us. Every joke, every story, every anecdote could be part of the bigger picture. The rumors about engagement weren't accidental. They were almost perfectly choreographed. Photos appearing in the press, casual mentions to journalists, subtle hints in interviews, all aligned in a sequence that maximized intrigue without ever confirming anything prematurely. Trevor noticed that even friends who thought they were in the know were being subtly manipulated. Meghan had a knack for allowing information to leak in just the right way, creating the impression of spontaneity while actually controlling the flow of the narrative. And yet, the balance between genuine emotion and calculated planning made it complicated for Trevor. There were moments of tenderness, of real connection, that made the rumors feel authentic. Laughter during private dinners, quiet walks in Los Angeles, moments of support during career decisions. All of it felt real, yet was interwoven with a subtle awareness of timing and consequence. It was a delicate dance, love and strategy, emotion and foresight, intertwined in ways that were difficult to separate. Hollywood insiders often noticed patterns in Meghan's behavior, even if they couldn't articulate them. Certain friends were nurtured, others distanced, all in ways that subtly influenced social dynamics. The rumors of engagement, when analyzed in retrospect, fit perfectly into this broader strategy. Trevor began to see that her influence extended beyond personal relationships. She was shaping perception, not just in Hollywood, but in the public sphere, in ways that would later have global implications. Trevor also emphasizes how Meghan managed her public image during this period. She understood the optics of relationships, the power of timing, and the influence of media coverage. Subtle gestures, carefully chosen outfits, and casual mentions in interviews were not accidental. They were part of a carefully constructed narrative designed to maintain interest, control perception, and generate anticipation. In many ways, Meghan's approach to engagement rumors mirrored her broader approach to life: strategic, deliberate, and always with an eye on the next move. There were moments when Trevor questioned whether this was all genuine. Did she really intend to marry, or was the engagement narrative simply another step in a larger plan? He recalls late-night conversations where Meghan spoke passionately about love, partnership, and future goals, moments that felt sincere. Yet, even in these intimate discussions, there was a sense of forethought, an awareness of how words and actions could ripple outward. This duality, authentic emotion intertwined with careful planning, became one of the defining complexities of their relationship. One particularly telling moment occurred during a dinner with close friends. Meghan casually mentioned her thoughts about public perception, timing, and narrative control in the context of Hollywood careers, not personal relationships. But Trevor realized afterward that the lessons she described could easily be applied to engagements, marriages, and even royal life. Her understanding of influence, audience, and timing was sophisticated, far beyond typical Hollywood maneuvering. It was a skill set that would later serve her in ways that shocked the world. Audience, consider this. If someone can manage rumors, public perception, and social dynamics in a Hollywood context with such precision, imagine what happens when the stakes are even higher. The global stage, royal institutions, and media scrutiny at an unprecedented scale. This was the trajectory Trevor began to piece together, even as he wrestled with the emotional complexities of their relationship. The rumors escalated gradually, moving from whispers among friends to subtle media mentions. At first, Trevor dismissed them as typical celebrity chatter. But patterns began to emerge. Timing, repetition, strategic hints in interviews, and careful social media appearances. Everything aligned in a way that suggested deliberate orchestration rather than coincidence. Trevor describes a growing unease during this period. It wasn't distrust at first. It was a dawning realization of how methodical Meghan could be, even in matters as personal as engagement rumors. By the time the engagement was officially announced, the groundwork had been meticulously laid. Public perception was shaped, narratives were controlled, and the world was primed for the story she wanted to tell. Trevor reflects on the duality of that moment. On one hand, it felt like a celebration of love. On the other, it was the culmination of a strategy that had been in motion for years. Every announcement, every photograph, every media statement aligned with a carefully constructed plan that few could see unfolding in real time. And yet, there were contradictions that made the narrative compelling. Meghan's charm, warmth, and seemingly spontaneous gestures created an image of a bride in love. But beneath that charm was an intricate web of planning, anticipation, and calculated influence. Trevor saw both sides, the human side, full of affection and hope, and the strategic side, always anticipating the next step, always managing perception, always positioning for advantage. By the end of this period, Trevor realized that the engagement rumors, which had seemed trivial at first, were in fact an early window into Meghan Markle's sophisticated approach to life, love, and influence. What appeared to be spontaneous or coincidental was often the product of foresight, strategic thinking, and precise execution. And it was this combination, charm, ambition, and calculated planning, that would define her trajectory in ways that few could have predicted. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. The world watched with bated breath as Meghan Markle walked down the aisle. Royal fans, Hollywood observers, and everyday viewers alike held their collective attention, mesmerized by a wedding that seemed plucked from a fairy tale. But what most people didn't see, and what Trevor Engelson reveals in his first-hand accounts, was that this wedding was more than just a celebration of love. It was the culmination of carefully orchestrated strategy, years of planning, and decisions designed to control perception on a global scale. Every detail, every appearance, every smile carried layers of meaning that few could grasp at the time. Trevor recalls the final weeks leading up to the ceremony with a mixture of awe and disbelief. On the surface, everything appeared seamless. Invitations sent, media prepared, the dress and venue meticulously chosen. But behind the polished veneer were calculated maneuvers designed to maximize impact. Meghan, according to Trevor, had a keen awareness of optics. How photographs would circulate, how headlines would read, and how the public would interpret every moment. Even the smallest gestures, from the way she held her bouquet to her expressions during the vows, were scrutinized, practiced, and perfected. Hollywood had prepared her for the cameras, but the global stage of royalty presented a new kind of challenge. Unlike film sets, where multiple takes and controlled environments allow for precision, real-time public events are unpredictable. Yet Meghan navigated it with remarkable confidence, as though she had rehearsed every interaction and anticipated every possible reaction. Trevor describes moments when she adjusted subtly, a nod here, a glance there, ensuring that both the cameras and the guests were guided toward the narrative she wanted to present. It wasn't just the visual presentation that demonstrated her strategic mindset. Trevor points to social interactions as equally revealing. The way Meghan engaged with royal staff, family members, and dignitaries illustrated her ability to balance charm, diplomacy, and influence. She listened carefully, offered measured compliments, and made connections that would later serve her both socially and strategically. Trevor notes that even small gestures, a smile to a relative, a word of acknowledgement to a senior aide, were calculated to convey warmth and approachability, building goodwill without appearing forced. Yet, the wedding was also a stage for controlled emotion. Meghan, Trevor recalls, understood the power of narrative in shaping public opinion. Emotional moments, tears during vows, laughter at speeches, subtle expressions of joy, were not merely spontaneous. They were amplified by timing, positioning, and awareness of the cameras. To the world, these gestures appeared heartfelt and genuine. To Trevor, they carried the unmistakable signature of someone who understood both performance and impact. Friends and acquaintances at the wedding noticed subtle patterns as well. Trevor recounts conversations where attendees marveled at Meghan's poise and composure, her ability to navigate intense scrutiny while maintaining grace. Some called it natural elegance. Others began to sense the precision beneath the charm. Trevor, having witnessed this duality firsthand over years of close contact, recognized that these were not mere coincidences. They were the product of deliberate, long-term strategy, executed flawlessly on one of the most visible stages imaginable. The media frenzy surrounding the wedding amplified Meghan's strategic positioning. Coverage was extensive, from global news outlets to social media commentary, creating an unprecedented narrative of fairy tale romance. Trevor explains that Meghan's awareness of this amplification allowed her to leverage public sentiment to her advantage. Positive coverage reinforced her image as a modern, approachable royal, while subtle missteps were minimized or redirected through controlled messaging. Every interaction, public statement, and gesture was a piece of a larger puzzle designed to maximize influence. But Trevor also reflects on the personal side of the experience. The wedding, while public, was deeply intimate for those involved. Behind the scenes, he observed moments of genuine affection, laughter, and vulnerability. These human moments, he emphasizes, made it difficult to reconcile the duality of Meghan's persona. On one hand, there was warmth, authenticity, and emotional connection. On the other, there was careful orchestration, meticulous planning, and strategic positioning. The combination was intoxicating, disorienting, and at times, unsettling. Family dynamics added another layer of complexity. Trevor recalls observing subtle tensions, hidden alliances, and quiet power plays among attendees. Meghan navigated these dynamics skillfully, often diffusing potential conflict with charm and strategic engagement. Trevor points out that the ability to manage interpersonal complexity in such a high-stakes, high-visibility environment is rare. It requires emotional intelligence, foresight, and an understanding of perception that few possess. Yet Meghan displayed all of these in abundance. Even small, seemingly inconsequential moments revealed strategic foresight. Trevor recalls a particular instance during the reception, a casual conversation, a strategically placed comment, a carefully timed laugh, small actions that influenced perception, strengthened alliances, and reinforced narratives. In hindsight, these moments were micro-strategies designed to consolidate influence, subtly shift dynamics, and ensure that Meghan's presence was both commanding and admired. Trevor also notes that the wedding served as a testing ground for broader ambitions. The careful orchestration of media coverage, the management of public perception, and the cultivation of social alliances all foreshadowed the calculated approach Meghan would later bring to her life as a royal. Every step of the wedding, from attire to interaction, contributed to a carefully constructed narrative that extended far beyond the ceremony itself. And yet, the duality persisted. Trevor emphasizes that despite the strategic orchestration, moments of genuine human connection remained. Private conversations, shared glances, and subtle gestures revealed depth, warmth, and vulnerability. These moments complicated the narrative, demonstrating that while Meghan was strategic and deliberate, she was also capable of authenticity and emotional resonance. The tension between calculated ambition and genuine connection became a defining feature of her persona, a feature that would continue to intrigue, perplex, and captivate both insiders and the public alike. Audience, consider this. If someone can orchestrate a wedding that captures global attention, navigates complex social dynamics, manages public perception, and maintains authenticity all at once, what does that imply about their capability for long-term strategic thinking? This is the lens through which Trevor Engelson views Meghan Markle, not simply as a partner, but as a highly capable individual, adept at managing influence, perception, and relationships on a scale few can comprehend. Trevor reflects on the aftermath of the wedding. The public narrative was overwhelmingly positive. Headlines celebrated a modern, approachable royal bride. Social media buzzed with admiration. Yet, behind the scenes, Trevor recognized the long-term implications of Meghan's strategic moves. The wedding was not merely a celebration. It was a carefully designed entry point into a new social, political, and cultural sphere. Every gesture, every interaction, every appearance was part of a broader plan that extended well beyond the confines of the day itself. And here's the crucial point. While the world saw a perfect fairy tale, Trevor observed the orchestration beneath the surface. Meghan's attention to detail, awareness of optics, and understanding of influence created a narrative that was both compelling and carefully controlled. For Trevor, this period was as fascinating as it was revealing, providing insights into a level of strategic thinking that few ever witnessed firsthand. But just as the wedding seemed like the pinnacle of this orchestration, an unexpected moment occurred. Subtle, almost imperceptible, yet profoundly revealing. Trevor describes it as a microcosm of Meghan's strategic genius, a glimpse into how she would navigate future challenges with foresight, adaptability, and precision. And what came next, immediately following the wedding, would set the stage for revelations that shocked not just Hollywood, but the world. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. That it's one thing to witness charm, ambition, and strategy from afar. It's another to see it up close, intimately, in ways that reveal the layers beneath the public persona. For Trevor Engelson, this realization came slowly, like the dawn breaking after a long night. At first, he saw Meghan Markle as he assumed most people did: charismatic, intelligent, ambitious, and endearing. But over time, patterns emerged. Subtle decisions, well-timed interactions, and the careful orchestration of events began to reveal something far more complex. A mind always planning, always calculating, always anticipating the next move. Trevor recalls one of the earliest moments when the realization hit. It wasn't dramatic or explosive, but it was a quiet instance that, in retrospect, spoke volumes. They were having dinner with friends, a casual night, filled with laughter and easy conversation. Meghan made an offhand comment about media coverage of a mutual acquaintance. At first, it seemed trivial, but Trevor noticed the precision of her phrasing, the awareness of potential interpretations, and the subtle way she guided the conversation to highlight certain points while minimizing others. That night, he began to see a pattern. Meghan wasn't just reacting to events. She was influencing them, shaping outcomes, and controlling perception in ways that most people never notice. The breakthrough came gradually. Small moments compounded into a larger picture. Trevor describes noticing how Meghan would handle disagreements, test reactions, and adjust behavior subtly to maintain influence. A joke that seemed casual was actually a probe. A compliment, perfectly timed, built alliances. Even private moments carried layers of meaning. Gestures, expressions, and statements were all aligned to achieve a desired outcome. The realization was both fascinating and unnerving. Trevor began to understand that Meghan's strategy was not a one-time tactic, but a consistent approach to life, relationships, and perception. One particularly revealing episode involved a conversation about career planning. Meghan spoke passionately about her ambitions and the steps required to achieve them. On the surface, It was an inspiring discussion about personal growth. But Trevor noticed how she framed the conversation, subtly positioning herself as both forward-thinking and influential. She spoke about opportunities, challenges, and public perception in a way that revealed a sophisticated understanding of influence. It wasn't manipulation in the overt sense. It was strategic foresight, applied with precision and subtlety. Trevor also recalls how Meghan navigated social gatherings with an almost uncanny awareness. She observed interactions, anticipated reactions, and adjusted her behavior in real time. For Trevor, this was both impressive and alarming. He began to see that her strategic thinking wasn't limited to career or public perception. It extended to personal relationships, friendships, and even private moments. Every action, no matter how small, was part of a broader understanding of influence and consequence. The breakthrough wasn't just about observing her behavior. It was about understanding intention. Trevor realized that Meghan's charm, warmth, and spontaneity were not contradictions to her strategic nature. Instead, they were tools she used consciously. By appearing approachable and genuine, she built trust, influence, and credibility, while simultaneously guiding outcomes in ways that served her long-term goals. This duality, the combination of authenticity and calculation, became the defining feature of his perception of her. Emotional beats were central to this realization. Trevor describes moments of genuine affection, vulnerability, and connection that made it difficult to separate strategy from sincerity. Late-night conversations, shared experiences, and small gestures of care demonstrated authenticity. Yet, even these moments carried a subtle awareness of consequence, a recognition that perception shapes reality. This complexity made the breakthrough both illuminating and emotionally challenging. Trevor was witnessing someone who could be both deeply human and highly strategic, and the tension between these aspects created a profound sense of intrigue and uncertainty. Trevor's breakthrough also involved recognizing patterns in how Meghan managed information. She was aware of what to reveal, when to reveal it, and to whom. Personal insights, private opinions, and selective disclosures were all carefully managed. For Trevor, this was the clearest indication of her strategic mindset. Unlike most people who act impulsively or reactively, Meghan demonstrated foresight, understanding how actions and statements ripple outward. This skill, Trevor realized, extended far beyond Hollywood gossip or career maneuvering. It had implications for public perception, media influence, and even future social positioning. Audience, consider this. If someone can consistently shape perception, anticipate outcomes, and subtly guide interactions in personal settings, how much more capable are they on a global stage where stakes, scrutiny, and consequences are exponentially higher? Trevor's breakthrough was not about suspicion. It was about recognition. He wasn't imagining patterns. He was observing them, repeatedly, in context, over time. He began to see that Meghan Markle's influence and strategic acumen were innate, refined, and applied with remarkable skill. Trevor recalls specific instances that solidified his understanding. A casual conversation with a friend, a subtle reaction to a comment, a gesture meant to build rapport. Each moment revealed a mind operating several steps ahead. And while some might call it manipulation, Trevor frames it as mastery, the ability to manage outcomes, influence perception, and navigate complex social landscapes effectively. The breakthrough was both awe-inspiring and unsettling. It changed the way he viewed her actions, decisions, and even the nature of their relationship. There was also the realization that Meghan's strategic awareness extended beyond the immediate context. Trevor noticed how she leveraged relationships, social networks, and public perception to create opportunities for herself. She understood timing, optics, and influence. Small moves, seemingly inconsequential, were calculated to produce results over weeks, months, and even years. This foresight was subtle yet consistent, and Trevor began to recognize it as a defining characteristic of her approach to life. Emotional complexity made the breakthrough more intense. Trevor describes feeling admiration, confusion, and even frustration. Admiration for her intelligence and foresight, confusion about the duality of strategy and authenticity, and frustration at realizing the extent to which outcomes were being guided without his initial awareness. He began to understand that being close to someone like Meghan involves navigating both genuine connection and calculated planning, a balancing act that few are equipped to manage. By the end of this period, Trevor's breakthrough was complete. He could no longer view Meghan through the lens of superficial charm or celebrity allure. He recognized the depth of her strategic thinking, the sophistication of her social maneuvering, and the duality of her persona. She was simultaneously authentic and calculated, charming and tactical, warm and highly aware of consequence. This recognition would prove crucial as their relationship progressed, and as the public stage. Hollywood, the media, and eventually royalty, presented new challenges and opportunities. But just as Trevor was beginning to fully grasp this duality, an incident occurred that left him stunned, a moment that crystallized everything he had been observing, confirming that Meghan's strategic mind was operating at a level he had never before encountered. That moment, small yet profound, set the stage for the revelations that would later shake both Hollywood and the world. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. If there's one thing Trevor Engelson learned over time, it's that Meghan Markle never acted impulsively. Every decision she made, no matter how seemingly minor, carried a purpose, a ripple effect, or a calculated consequence. To outsiders, her choices appeared spontaneous or driven by circumstance. To Trevor, who observed her closely, they were anything but. She was always thinking several moves ahead. Not just for herself, but for how others would perceive her, react to her, and ultimately, be influenced by her actions. Trevor recalls early examples in Hollywood, before any hint of royalty or international scrutiny. Choosing which roles to audition for wasn't just about career advancement. It was about shaping a narrative. Every public appearance, every interaction with colleagues, and every comment to the media was an opportunity to reinforce her image. Even seemingly trivial social events, a lunch with a producer, a charity fundraiser, or a casual interview, were orchestrated with precision. She evaluated potential outcomes, considered public perception, and aligned her choices with long-term objectives. One vivid example Trevor recounts involved a high-profile industry party. On the surface, it was a glamorous networking event, typical for someone in Meghan's position. But Meghan approached it like a chess game. She engaged specific individuals, subtly directing conversations to highlight shared values and ambitions, while avoiding potential conflicts. Trevor noticed her scanning the room constantly, adjusting her tone, her posture, even her smile, depending on who she was interacting with. These weren't random behaviors. They were strategic moves designed to influence perception, form alliances, and enhance her social capital. It wasn't only in public situations that Meghan exhibited this level of foresight. Trevor describes private moments where her decision-making revealed a sophisticated understanding of influence and control. A comment during dinner could test a friend's loyalty. A subtle observation could gauge a colleague's intentions. Even casual choices, like which outfit to wear or which path to take to an event, were layered with meaning. To Trevor, these patterns gradually formed a portrait of someone operating at a level of calculated awareness few possess. Strategic decision-making extended into relationships as well. Trevor noticed that Meghan cultivated connections with precision. Friendships were nurtured, alliances built, and occasionally, ties weakened or discarded, all based on careful assessment of potential influence, benefit, or alignment with her goals. Trevor recounts instances where he would later see the outcome of these social calculations. Someone he assumed was just a friend became an ally, a casual acquaintance became a stepping stone, and others faded quietly from view. Nothing was left to chance. One particularly striking example involved a public appearance meant to coincide with media coverage of a high-profile event. On the surface, it appeared spontaneous. Meghan smiling at the right moment, making an offhand comment to the press, and appearing effortlessly charming. Trevor, however, noticed the careful timing. The arrangement had been discussed weeks prior, the statements premeditated, and the optics meticulously planned. It was a minor move in a larger strategy, yet its impact was enormous, influencing public perception, shaping media narratives, and reinforcing the carefully curated persona she presented to the world. Trevor also points out the duality in Meghan's strategic approach. Her ability to blend genuine emotion with calculated moves created an almost imperceptible balance between authenticity and manipulation. A smile could convey warmth and charm, but it also served as a tool to influence mood and perception. A casual conversation could build trust, while subtly assessing someone's loyalty or potential usefulness. Trevor emphasizes that this duality was not apparent to most people. Even those closest to her often missed the underlying pattern. But perhaps the most revealing aspect of Meghan's calculated decisions was her awareness of timing. Trevor explains that she had an intuitive sense of when to act, when to speak, and when to remain silent. Timing wasn't just about appearances. It was about creating maximum impact with minimal effort. Every gesture, comment, or decision was measured against potential outcomes, ensuring that her influence was optimized and that reactions, both positive and negative, could be anticipated and managed. Even in matters that seemed personal, romantic decisions, private interactions, or family discussions, Meghan applied this level of foresight. Trevor recalls conversations where she would subtly test reactions, observe responses, and adjust behavior accordingly. This wasn't manipulation in the overtly malicious sense. It was a disciplined understanding of human behavior, influence, and consequence. Trevor, witnessing this up close, began to recognize the extraordinary skill involved in balancing authenticity with strategy. Audience, think about this for a moment. If someone can consistently manage public perception, navigate complex social dynamics, and anticipate reactions with such precision in everyday life, imagine what happens when the stakes are global, the scrutiny is relentless, and the consequences are monumental.